All right, guys. I am back. Your sister Shia, the Hood Priestess. Let My People Go is the title. Okay. Juneteenth. Let's take a look at what's going on in the world today. This was no, this was last year. Okay, I'm still gonna read it. Let me share my screen. The devil is very well, he tries to be crafty, but he's not that crafty. Okay, so let's we got to get into the truth. We got to stay in the truth, stay woke at all cost, you know. Don't let nobody or nothing, no article, no anything throw you off. You have to read things through, and then you have to dissect them, and then you have to summarize them and make sure they are true. So this is the Guardian .com 11 months ago. The This one says San Francisco protesters topple statues of Ulysses Grant and other slave owners. Figures of Spanish missionary Father Junipero Serra and Francis Scott Key, composer of the Star Spangled Banner, also fall. Protesters walked towards the statue of Francis Scott Key at the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, California on Friday. In this picture obtained from social media. On Friday night in San Francisco, protesters tore down and defaced statues of white men who enslaved black and indigenous people, among them Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president, who in the Civil War led the Union armies in the defeat of the slave-owning Confederacy. Video posted on social media and by local news outlets showed a small crowd in Golden Gate Park cheering as people toppled the statues with rope, covered them with red paint, and in at least one instance, dragged them through the grass. Statues of Father Junipero Serra and Francis Scott Key, the author of the Star Spangled Banner, were also brought down. Grant was the last U.S. president to have personally owned another human being. Though his father was an abolitionist, Grant married a woman from a slave-owning family and personally directed the labor of enslaved workers at their plantation in Missouri. In 1859, 2 years before the Civil War, he emancipated William Jones, a slave aged around 35, whom he had personally owned. During the war, his wife Julia traveled with a woman named Jules who was still enslaved, a decision that prompted public condemnation. The Grant family did not free Jules after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Instead, according to the White House Historical Association, Jules ran away. On Friday, Americans celebrated Juneteenth, a holiday marking the end of slavery. Juneteenth also marks the long period between the U.S. government officially ended slavery and when formally enslaved people learned they were free. In light of the events in San Francisco, some commentators argued that Grant's legacy deserved respect. As a general, he smashed the Confederacy, and as president, he crushed the Klan. The journalist Adam Sewer, who writes frequently about America's racist history, wrote on Twitter. As president from 1869 to 1877, Grant pushed through Congress legislation cracking down on the Ku Klux Klan. He also called on the Army to help federal officials arrest and break up bands of disguised night marauders. Allison Hobbs wrote in The Guardian in 2017, arguing that Grant was a positive model for how the U.S. government should crack down on white supremacist vigilantes after deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. But as the Smithsonian Magazine reported, as President Grant also launched an illegal war against the Plains Indians and then lied about it, Junipero Serra was a Spanish priest who played a central role in the violent colonization of California. His path towards being canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church has long been met with protest by Native Americans. Contemporaries, including the French explorer Jean-Francois de la Goupe de la Perouse, compared the Catholic missions the priest founded to slave plantations, where indigenous people were forced to work and harshly disciplined. By law, all baptized Indians subjected themselves completely to the authority of the Franciscans. They could be whipped, shackled, or imprisoned for disobedience and hunted down if they fled the mission grounds. PBS News wrote in its biography of Serra. Indian recruits, who were often forced to convert nearly at gunpoint, could be expected to survive mission life for only about 10 years. In 2015, Ron Andrade, the executive director of the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission, told The Guardian, "Everywhere they put a mission, the majority of Indians are gone." Serra knew what they were doing. They were taking the land, taking the crops. He knew the soldiers were raping women, and he turned his head. Francis Scott Key, the author of America's national anthem, not only personally enslaved people, but also tried to silence the free speech of abolitionists, using his position as district attorney for Washington, D.C. in the 1830s to launch high-profile cases attacking the abolitionist movement. In San Francisco, protesters dragged the Key statue through the grass and were going to dump it in a nearby fountain until they were told the fountain was a memorial to the AIDS epidemic and stopped, a witness tweeted. We have a small favor to ask through these. What about to ask for some money? I'll be back, y'all. Black Lives Matter movement nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Versace executive accuses Los Angeles police of racial profiling. Wisconsin deploys National Guard amid protest over police shooting. Kenosha, teen charged with murder after 2 Black Lives Matter protesters killed. U.S. military police sought use of heat ray to disperse White House protesters. That's all last year. Let's see what's going on this year. Them curses. All right. Third wave of COVID definitely underway in the UK, says expert. Professional Adam Finn's comments come after PHE reported 79% rise in number of Delta variant cases in just 1 week. A government scientific advisor has said a third wave of the coronavirus pandemic is definitely underway as the vaccine program races to outpace the Delta variants spread across the UK. It comes after Public Health England reported a 79% rise in the number of cases of the variant first identified in India in a week. Hospital admissions have almost doubled. Experts say the sudden increase is being driven by infections among younger people. The vaccination program was opened up to people aged 18 and over on Friday, and surge testing is being rolled out in parts of South London and Cumbria. Adam Finn, who is a member of the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunization, JCVI, told Radio 4's Today program it's going up. Perhaps we can be a little bit optimistic. It's not going up any faster, but nevertheless, it's going up. So this third wave is definitely underway. we can conclude that the race is firmly on between the vaccine program, particularly getting older people's second doses done, and the Delta variant third wave. He said the JCVI was still deciding whether children should be vaccinated, but that at the moment, adults are the priority. Even if some decision were made to immunize children, it wouldn't be appropriate right now, either here or anywhere else in Europe, to give our doses predominantly to children because it's adults that get sick. So vaccinating adults is clearly the priority right now, he said. Asked whether he felt confident that vaccinations would outpace the variant, he said, "No, I don't feel confident, but I think there's some grounds for optimism." Mm-mm. Cases and deaths as published June 18th, 2021. Vaccinations as published June 17th, 2021. Daily vaccinations include both doses. Percentage is of total population. Weekly change shows difference from 7 days ago. He told Times Radio the latest on figures continue to show a rise, but that rise has not accelerated quite as much as I'd feared over the last week. So the race is on. He said administering second doses, especially to older people, as quickly as possible would be key to avoiding a great big surge of hospitalizations and deaths. Dr. Mike Tildesley, an epidemiologist and a member of the SPY-M modeling group, said those becoming infected and being admitted to hospital were slightly younger and therefore also slightly less sick and had a higher chance of recovery. All of these are cautiously good signs, but of course, we do need to keep an eye on this over the next couple of weeks so that we can give as much information as we can to the government prior to the July 19th reopening, he told BBC Breakfast. Surge testing was being rolled out in South London on Saturday in Clapham, Brixton, South Stockwell, West Norwood, and Vauxhall. People who live in Lambeth are being strongly encouraged to take a PCR test, even if they do not have symptoms. In Cumbria, everyone aged 12 to 30 has also been urged to take a test, and pupils will be offered tests at school. The government said people in these areas should also continue to use free lateral flow tests twice a week. Giant vaccination clinics are expected to open in London this weekend, including at the Olympic Stadium and the Tottenham Hotspur, Chelsea, and Charlton athletic football grounds. The health secretary, Matt Hancock, is considering canceling the 10 days of self isolation for people who have had two vaccines if they come into contact with an infected person, according to the Times. Linda Bald, a professor of public health at the University of Edinburgh, told Times Radio it was already happening in the U.S. The Centers for Disease Control changed their guidance a while ago to say that people who had both doses of the vaccine and about 10 to 14 days after the second dose didn't have to self isolate. So I think we are moving in that direction. We have a small favor to ask. Oh, same thing. All right. Okay. Now, what else did we have? You okay? What's wrong?
Nothing.
Your heart beats so fast. Lick your lips. Lick your lips.
Okay.
Now, while you're in here. Aiden, don't be disobedient. Come on now. Lick your lips. Aiden, lick your lips. Stop looking ugly. I don't like that. very, very long interpretation. Those residing in the southeastern regions in American states are less likely to have been in an interracial relationship and are less likely to interracially date in the future. People who engaged in regular religious customs at age 12 are also less likely to interracially date. Get this up here. A 2015 study of interracial online dating amongst multiple European countries, analyzing the dating preferences of Europeans, Arabs, Africans, Asians, and Hispanics, found that in an aggregate, all races ranked Europeans as most preferred, followed by Hispanics and Asians as intermediately preferable, with Africans and Arabs the least preferred. Country specific results were more variable, with countries with more non Europeans showing more openness for Europeans to engage in interracial dating, while those with tensions between racial groups, such as in cases where tensions existed between Europeans and Arabs due to the recent influx of refugees, showed a marked decrease in preference for interracial dating between those two groups. Hey, come in here. The researchers did note a limitation of the study was selection bias, as the data gathered may have been disproportionately drawn from people already inclined to engage in interracial dating. I've been told you to come in here. Currently, there are websites specifically targeted to different demographic preferences, such that singles can sign up online and focus on one particular partner quality, such as race, religious beliefs, or ethnicity. In addition to this, there are online dating services that target race specific partner choices, and a selection of pages dedicated to interracial dating that allow users to select partners based on age, gender, and particularly race. Online dating services experience controversy in this context, as debate is cast over whether statements such as no Asians or not attracted to Asians in user profiles are racist or merely signify individual preferences. Uh, Currently, there are websites specifically targeted to different demographic preferences, such that singles can sign up. Wait, did I read? Yeah, I read that. Non-white ethnic minorities who feel they lack dating prospects as a result of their race sometimes refer to themselves as ethnocels, a term related to incel. Racial preferences can sometimes considered as a subset of lookism. Um, Racism in the LGBT community. Hong Tong Nguyen, an assistant professor of English and film studies at Bryn Mawr College, wrote that Asian men are often feminized and desexualized by both mainstream and LGBT media. The gay Asian Canadian author Richard Fung has written that while black men are portrayed as hypersexualized, gay Asian men are portrayed as being undersexed. According to Fung, gay Asian men tend to ignore or display displeasure with races such as Arabs, blacks, and other Asians, but seemingly give sexual acceptance and approval to gay white men. However, white gay men are more likely than other racial groups to state no Asians when seeking partners. Asian American women also report similar discrimination in lesbian, gay, bisexual, LGBT communities. According to a study by Sung, Zymansky, and Heinrich Beck, 2015, Asian American participants who identified as lesbian or bisexual often reported invisibility, stereotyping, and fetishism in LGBT circles and the larger U.S. culture. Racial preferences are also prevalent in gay online dating. Pua and Kaufman noted that men seeking men online were more likely than men seeking women to look at racial traits. In a qualitative study conducted by Paul Ayala and Choi with Asian and Pacific Islanders API, Latino and African American men seeking men, participants interviewed endorsed racial preference as a common criterion in online dating partner selection. Racial bias. A 2015 study on sexual racism among gay and bisexual men found a strong correlation between test subjects' racist attitudes and their stated racial preferences. Philosopher Amia Renivison argued for racialized origins of Western beauty standards in her 2018 essay, Does Anyone Have the Right to Sex? And stated that racial bias can shape sexual desire. Racial fetishism. Racial fetishism is sexually fetishizing a person or culture belonging to a specific race or ethnic group. Theories. Homi K. Baba explains racial fetishism as a version of racist stereotyping, which is woven into colonial discourse and based on multiple contradictory and splitting beliefs, similar to the disavowal which Freud discusses. He defines colonial discourse as that which activates the simultaneous recognition and disavowal of racial, cultural, historical differences, and whose goal is to define the colonized as other, but also as fixed and knowable stereotypes. Racial fetishism involves contradictory belief systems where the other is both demonized and idolized. The effects of racial fetishism as a form of sexual racism are discussed in research conducted by Plummer. Plummer used qualitative interviews within given focus groups and found that specific social locations came up as areas in which sexual racism commonly manifests. These mentioned social locations included pornographic media, gay clubs and bars, casual sex encounters, as well as romantic relationships. This high prevalence was recorded within Plummer's research to consequently relate it to the recorder lower self-esteem, internalized sexual racism, and increased psychological distress in participants of color. Fetishism can take multiple forms and has branched off to incorporate different races. The theories of naturalist Darwin can offer some observations in regards to why some people might find other races more attractive than their own. Attraction can be viewed as a mechanism for choosing a healthy mate. People's minds have evolved to recognize aspects of other people's biology that makes them an appropriate or good mate. This area of theory is called optimal outbreeding hypothesis. Examples: white women. Ray Chow argues that the fetishism of white women in Chinese media does not have to do with sex. Chow describes it as a type of commodity fetishism. White women are seen as a representation of what China does not have, an image of a woman as something more than heterosexual opposite to man. Perry Johansson argues that following the globalization of China, the perception of Westerners changed drastically. With the opening of China to the outside world, representations of Westerners shifted from enemies of China to individuals of great power, money, and pleasure. In a study of Chinese advertisements from 1990 to 1995, marketed solely to the Chinese people, Johansson concluded that in China, the racial fetish of Western women does have to do with sex. Chinese advertisements depict Western women as symbols of strength and sexuality. The body language of Chinese models in ads expresses shyness and subordination with canting of heads and bodies, lying down and covering of faces, while the body language of Western women demonstrates power and uninhibited unashamedness. Western women more often hold their heads high, stare straight into the camera, and do not cover their mouths while laughing. The study suggested Western women represent a shift in the power dynamics between women and men and are even presented with qualities otherwise considered to be masculine in Chinese culture. Asian women. The Asian fetish. An Asian fetish focusing on East Asian, Southeast Asian, and to some extent South Asian women has been documented in Australasia, North American, and Scandinavia. According to an article from the Washington and Lee Journal of Civil Rights and Social Justice, the Asian fetish syndrome is born out of the male desire for dominance and the stereotype of Asian women as individuals open to domination. For example, following the 1970s and a peak in the American feminist movement, many white men turned to mail order bride companies in search of a loyal, understanding, and subservient partner. They saw women of their own race as too career oriented and strong willed. Asian women were the antithesis to their perception of white women. While white women resisted powerlessness and subjugation to the white man, Asian women were seen as open to the subjugation, even depicted as enjoying it. The song Yellow Fever by the Bloodhound Gang includes lyrics such as, "She's an oriental rug 'cause I lay her where I please, and then I blindfold her with dental floss and get down on her knees." Both of these instances exemplify the stereotype of Asians as submissive. Margaret Cho has labeled Gwen Stefani's Harajuku Girls as a minstrel show because they represent fetished East Asian stereotypes. The girls follow Stefani around on tour and are contractually obligated not to speak English in public. The performer had renamed them corresponding to her album title and clothing brand LAMB, Love Angel Music and Baby. Furthermore, there have been many cases of Asian fetishism leading to criminal activity. In one case in 2000, two men, David Daly and Edmund Ball, abducted and blindfolded two Japanese girls in Washington, one who was 18 and the other who was 19. Ball specifically targeted these Asian students because he thought they were submissive and were less likely to report sexual abuse. In another case in 2005, Michael Lohman, a doctoral student at Princeton University, was charged by the state of New Jersey for reckless endangerment, theft, harassment, as well as tampering with a food product. Michael had cut locks of hair off at least 9 Asian women. He also poured his semen and urine into the drinks of Asian Princeton students more than 50 times. Ugh. In his apartment, Michael also had mittens filled with hairs of Asian women. I'm about to puke. Middle Eastern women. According to multiple articles, the West's fetishization of fully covered Arab women has led to the stereotype that Middle Eastern women are oppressed and therefore submissive. When French armies invaded Algeria, they had anticipated Algerian women to be sexually available and hookah smokers. To their surprise, Algerian women actually appeared to have been more modestly dressed and covered from their head to toes. Many French photographers paid Algerian women to remove their religious attire and pose for provocative photos to make French postcards. In his book Desiring Arabs, Joseph Massad talks about how the West interpretation of Arab culture has painted the stereotype of Arab women being exotic and desirable. Massad's book was largely influenced by Edward Said's book Orientalism. Latina women. In her book Sex Tourism in Bahia, Ambiguous Entanglements, Erica Lorraine Williams published the first full-length ethnography of sex tourism in Brazil, including interviews with tourists who came solely to participate in sexual tourism, which may be considered a form of racialized fetishism. One of the tourists interviewed described his experience. "I've had a thing for Latin, brown skinned women since my early 20s. I'm from a place where there are a lot of blonde, white girls. Whatever you have, you like the opposite. They're exotic, intriguing." Black women. The fetishization of black women expanded during the colonial era, as some white male slave owners raped and sexually abused their black female slaves. They justified their actions by labeling the women as hypersexual property. These labels solidified into what is commonly referred to as the Jezebel stereotype. The opposite of this Jezebel identity or persona is the mammy figure, who loses all of her sexual agency and autonomy and becomes an asexual figure. L. H. Stallings notes that the creation and identities for the Jezebel or mammy figures are dependent upon patriarchy and heterosexuality. An example of racial fetishism within the colonial era is that of Sarah Bartman. Bartman's body was utilized as a means to develop an anatomically accurate representation of a black woman's body, juxtaposed to that of a white European woman's body during the age of biological racism. The scientists studying her anatomy went as far as making a mold of Bartman's genitalia post-mortem because she refused him access to examine her vaginal region while she was alive. The data collected on Bartman is the origin of the black female body stereotype: large buttocks and labia. Charmaine Nelson discusses the way black females are presented in paintings, with an emphasis on nude paintings. Nelson argues that every nude painting feeds into the voyeuristic male gaze, but the way black women are painted has even more undertones. The black female body defies the white male subject's desire for a single subject of pure origin in two ways. Firstly, through a sexual otherness as woman, and secondly, through a racial and color otherness as black. It is the combined power of these two markers of social location which has enabled Western artists to represent black women at the margins of societal boundaries of propriety. The black woman is considered a fetish in these paintings, and she is only viewed in a sexual lens. One of the more recent popular discourses around the fetishization of black women surrounds the release of Nicki Minaj's popular song Anaconda in 2014. The entire song and music video revolves around the largeness of black women's bottoms. While some praise Minaj's work for its embrace of female sexuality, some criticize that this song continues to reduce black women to be the focus of the male gaze. The 2020 WAP song by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion received a similar mixed reception, with some outlets praising its embrace of black female sexuality and others claiming it was degrading or objectifying women of color. Black men. Most commonly, black men are expected to be hypermasculine and hypersexual, and their fetishization is seen predominantly throughout porn and the BBC category, which reinforces the idea that they should have a, as the word is used much more frequently than COCK in African American English. The phrase BBC, which ranks among the most searched categories as of 2019, is assumed to have originated from white fetishization of interracial pornography involving black males. The stereotype of the larger has been subjected to scientific scrutiny with inconclusive results. Furthermore, within porn videos, the black male is expected to be rough and dominant, acting in almost a primitive manner. This reflects the prominent Mandingo stereotype of black men, dating back to the time of slavery. Black actors in porn have been calling out issues with filming on social media, bringing attention to the common but outdated practice whereby a white performer charges a higher rate for interracial IR scenes, to which Isaiah Maxwell states IR is a smokescreen for what you're really trying to say. It doesn't mean Asian or Latino. It means, are you willing to have with a black guy? The aspect of the black male being a performer under the white gaze, according to psychiatrist and political philosopher Frantz Fanon, can be manifested through the sporting body and their representation with the sphere of athleticism. Ben Carrington further elaborates on this in his article, Race, Representation, and the Sporting Body, whereby blackness itself was pathologized as a deviant identity, and the black male was stereotyped and subsequently mythologized as a hypersexed, almost animal-like entity. This idea that the black man has to possess animalistic behavior is explained in more detail by Carrington, explaining that black athletes, female and male, are invariably described as being strong, powerful, and quick, but with unpredictable and wild moments when they supposedly lack the cognitive capabilities, unlike their white peers, to have composure at critical moments. Just as Fanon talks about the white gaze, Carrington presents the view that representation in the media, both in sports and pornography, leaves the black male body vulnerable and exposed to inspection. Just sexual immorality. We just can't be modest and love one another. Just can't be that. Just gotta be a whole lot of extra stuff. Just
Can I go to some
turn it down. Okay, so this is stereotypes of African Americans on interracial relationships. Oftentimes, black women's opinions are not heard in studies that examine interracial relationships. Black women are often assumed to be just naturally angry. However, the implications of black women's opinions are not explored within the context of race and history. According to Erica Child's study, black women are most oppressed to interracial relationships. Since the 1600s, interracial sexuality has represented unfortunate sentiments for black women. Black men who were engaged with white women were severely punished. However, white men who exploited black women were never reprimanded. In fact, it was more economically favorable for a black woman to birth a white man's child because slave labor would be increased by the one drop rule. It was taboo for a white woman to have a black man's child, as it was seen as race tainting. In contemporary times, interracial relationships can sometimes represent rejection for black women. The probability of finding a good black man was low because the prevalence of homicide, drugs, incarceration, and interracial relationship making the task for black women more difficult. As concluded from the study, interracial dating compromises black love. It was often that participants expressed their opinions that black love is important and represents more than an aesthetic, since it is about black solidarity. Angry black women believe that if whites will never understand black people and they still regard black people as inferior, interracial relationships will never be worthwhile. The study shows that most of the participants think that black women who have interracial relationships will not betray or disassociate with the black community, but black men who date interracially are seen as taking away from the black community to advance the white patriarchy. The beliefs regarding interracial relationships also stem from other stereotypes, such as black men wanting white women only for their money. The black bitch. Just as the angry black woman is a contemporary manifestation of the sapphire stereotype, the BB is a contemporary manifestation of the Jezebel stereotype. Characters best characterized bad black girls, black whores, and black bees are archetypes of many blaxploitation films produced by the Hollywood establishment. One example of the archetype is the character of Letitia Musgrove in the film Monsters Ball, portrayed by Halle Berry. Journalists utilize the angry black woman archetype in their narratives of Michelle Obama during the 2007 through 2008 presidential primaries. Coverage of her ran the gamut from fawning to favorable to strong to angry to intimidating and unpatriotic. She told Gayle King on CBS This Morning that she has been caricatured as an angry black woman and that she hopes America will one day learn more about her. That's been an image that people have tried to paint of me since, the day Barack announced that I'm some angry black woman, she said. She dismissed a book by New York Times reporter Jodi Kantor entitled The Obamas. Kantor portrayed her as a hard-nosed operator who'd sometimes clashed with staffers, but she insisted that the portrayal is inaccurate. The strong black woman stereotype is a discourse through that primarily black middle class women in the Black Baptist Church instruct working class black women on morality, self-help, and economic empowerment, and assimilative values in the bigger interest of racial uplift and pride. Higginbotham, 1993. In that narrative, the woman documents middle class women attempting to push back against dominant racist narratives of black women being immoral, promiscuous, unclean, lazy, and mannerless by engaging in public outreach campaigns that include literature that warns against brightly colored clothing, gum chewing, loud talking, and unclean homes, among other directives. That discourse is harmful, dehumanizing, and silencing. Corbin et al. Argued, we see strong black woman as a dominant response that preserves individual agency and staves off being maligned and dismissed as an angry black woman in places where being heard is critically important. It becomes part of a counteroffensive script to cope with misogynor attacks. Additionally, strong black woman functions as an internalized mechanism that privileges resilience, perseverance, and silence. The strong black woman narrative is another controlling image that perpetuates the idea that it is acceptable to mistreat black women because they are strong and so can handle it. That narrative can also act as a silencing method. When black women who are struggling to be heard because they go through things in life like everyone else, they are silenced and reminded that they are strong instead of actions being taken toward alleviating their problems. The independent black woman, see also BAPS, which is a 1997 American female buddy comedy film directed by Robert Townsend and starring Halle Berry, Natalie Desselle, and Martin Landau. The film was written by Troy Beyer and was her first screenplay. The film is about two aspiring female entrepreneurs from Georgia, Niecy and Mickey. The independent black woman is the depiction of a narcissistic, overachieving, financially successful woman who emasculates black males in her life. Mia Moody, a professor of journalism at Baylor University, described the independent black woman in two articles: a rhetorical analysis of the meaning of the independent woman and the meaning of independent woman in music. In her studies, Moody concluded that the lyrics and videos of male and female artists portrayed independent women differently. The rapper Roxanne Shantae's 1989 rendition of Independent Woman explored relationships and asked women not to dote on partners who do not reciprocate. Similarly, the definition of an independent woman in Urban Dictionary is this: a woman who pays her own bills, buys her own things, and does not allow a man to affect her stability or self confidence. She supports herself entirely on her own and is proud to be able to do so. Destiny's Child's song Independent Women encourages women to be strong and independent for the sake of their dignity and not for the sake of impressing men. The group frowns upon the idea of depending on anyone. If you're gonna brag, make sure it's your money you flaunt. Depend on no one else to give you what you want. The singers claim their independence through their financial stability. Moody concluded female rappers often depicted sex as a tool for obtaining independence by controlling men and buying material goods, while male rappers viewed the independent woman as one who is educated, pays her own bills, and creates a good home life. They fail to mention settling down and often note that a woman should not weigh them down. Moody analyzed songs, corresponding music videos, and viewer comments of six rap songs by Yo Gotti, Webby, Drake, Candy Red, Trina, and Nicki Minaj. She found four main messages: wealth equals independence, beauty and independence are connected, average men deserve perfect women, and sexual prowess equals independence. Uh, let's see, sports. In Darwin's Athletes, John Hoberman writes that the prominence of African American athletes encourages a lack of emphasis on academic achievement in black communities. Several other authors have said that sports coverage that highlights natural black athleticism has the effect of suggesting white superiority in other areas, such as intelligence. Some contemporary sports commentators have questioned whether blacks are intelligent enough to hold strategic positions or coach games such as football. In another example, a study of the portrayal of race, ethnicity, and nationality in televised sporting events by the journalist Derek Z. Jackson in 1989 showed that blacks were more likely than whites to be described in demeaning intellectual terms. Criminal stereotyping. According to Lawrence Grossman, former president of CBS News and PBS television newscast, disproportionately show African Americans under arrest, living in slums, on welfare, and in need of help from the community. Similarly, Hurwitz and Pepley wrote that violent acts committed by a person of color often take up more than half of local news broadcasts, which often portray the person of color in a much more sinister light than their white counterparts. The authors argue that African Americans are not only more likely to be seen as suspects of horrendous crimes in the press, but also are interpreted as being violent or harmful individuals to the general public. Mary Beth Oliver, a professor at Penn State University, stated that the frequency with which black men specifically have been the target of police aggression speaks to the undeniable role that race plays in false assumptions of danger and criminality. Oliver additionally stated that the variables that play contributory roles in priming thoughts of dangerous or aggressive black men are age, dress, and gender, among others, which lead to the false assumptions of danger and criminality. New media stereotypes. Social media in 2012, Mia Moody, assistant professor of journalism, public relations, and new media in Baylor's College of Arts and Sciences, documented Facebook fans' use of social media to target U.S. President Barack Obama and his family through stereotypes. Her study found several themes and missions of groups targeting the Obamas. Some groups focused on attacking his politics and consisted of Facebook members who had an interest in politics and used social media to share their ideas. Other more malicious types focused on the president's race, religion, sexual orientation, personality, and diet. Moody analyzed more than 20 Facebook groups pages using the words hate Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. Hate groups, which once recruited members through word of mouth and distribution of pamphlets, spread the message that one race is inferior, targeted a historically oppressed group, and used degrading, hateful terms. She concluded that historical stereotypes focusing on diet and blackface had all but disappeared from mainstream television shows and movies, but had resurfaced in new media representations. Most portrayals fell into three categories: blackface, animalistic, and evil angry. Similarly, media had made progress in their handling of gender related topics, but Facebook offered a new platform for sexist messages to thrive. Facebook users played up shallow patriarchal representations of Michelle Obama, focusing on her emotions, appearance, and personality. Conversely, they emphasized historical stereotypes of Barack Obama that depicted him as flashy and animalistic. Media's reliance on stereotypes of women and African Americans not only hindered civil rights, but also helped determine how people treated marginalized groups, her study found. Hip hop music has reinforced stereotypes about black men. Violent, misogynistic lyrics and rap music performed by African American male rappers has increased negative stereotypes against black men. African American women are degraded and referred to as B's and H's in rap music. African American women are over sexualized in hip hop music videos and are portrayed as sexual objects for rappers. Hip hop portrays a stereotypical black masculine aesthetic. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Maikea people. Oh, I didn't switched. Okay, so the Maikea are a group of Malagasy speaking horticulturalists and foragers who are often described as the lowland hunter gatherers of Madagascar. They inhabit the Maikea forest, a patch of mixed spiny forest and dry deciduous forest along the coast of southwestern Madagascar. The Maikea are predominantly of Sakalava origin, Sakavala, although the term describes a lifestyle rather than an ethnic group per se, and individuals from a variety of Malagasy ethnic groups are found among the Maikea. The family encampments of the Maikea shift from prime corn planting territory at the edge of the forest in the rainy season to the interior forest rich with tenrecs and other game in the dry season, when the community becomes highly dependent on spongy tubers to meet their daily demand for water. Their lifestyle is interdependent with that of their neighboring Vizo fishermen and the Misikaro farmers and herders, with whom they trade products caught, foraged, or cultivated in the forest. Many Maikea also occasionally engage in paid work such as guarding the zebu herds or tending the cornfields of others. The present day Maikea are not a remnant of an ancient Malagasy hunter gatherer society, but are instead descendants of individuals who took refuge in the forest beginning in the 1800s to escape military conflict, heavy taxation, and other oppressive factors. Their way of life is perceived by villagers and city dwellers alike as ancestral, contributing to a mystique about them that has inspired various myths and legends. They are commonly believed to be the mythical Vazimba, the original inhabitants of the island, although there is no evidence to support this view. They are distinct from the Biozi hunter gatherers of the highlands, while some 1,500 individuals are known to identify as Maikea. Many Malagasy disbelieve that the community continues to exist in the present day. The Maikea are hunter gatherers, also known as foragers, who practice limited farming. The Maikea label is applied to those who live this subsistence lifestyle rather than being tied to a specific ethnicity. There are numerous groups termed Maikea along the west and southwest coast of Madagascar, with the majority living in and around the spiny Maikea forest on the southwestern coast between Morambe and Toliara. an area extending 2,500 square kilometers. Historically, this main concentration of Mykia may have extended as far south as the Fiorana River and as far north as the Mangoki River. Another main cluster of Mykia lived to the west and southwest of Lake Ihotri. They are typically considered a subsect of the Sakalava ethnic group, although there are Mykia individuals who trace their origins to other ethnic groups. Their adherence to a way of life perceived by villagers and city dwellers as ancestral has contributed to the mystique and various myths and legends about them. And many Malagasy believe they are the descendants of Bazimba, the original inhabitants of the island. Although there is no evidence to support this view, the majority of Malagasy believe the existence of the Mykia to be a myth and are unaware that any Malagasy continue to live the Mykia lifestyle to the present day. The term Mykia is principally used by outsiders to label this group and is not often used by members of this community themselves. Most Mykia prefer to call themselves either Vizo Mykia or Masikaro Mykia, depending on their specific family lineages. The Mykia are not remnants of an early hunter-gatherer society, although researchers remain uncertain when the Mykia first adopted a forest-dwelling hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They have determined that the Mykia were only recently established as a community. The current Mykia population is believed to be descended largely from Masikoro villagers who fled into the forest to escape advancing Marina and Sakalava armies in the 18th and 19th centuries. Colonial French documents dating to 1901 describe hunter-gatherers by the name of Mykia living in the southwest of the island. The population is believed to have swelled during the 1947 uprising against French colonial rule, when many Malagasy families left towns and villages to hide in forests across the country. The country. Oil exploration in the 1950s and 1960s entailed cutting paths through the formerly untouched forests of the Southwest, which further contributed to the migration of villagers into the forest to adopt the Mykia lifestyle. Mykia are subject to national laws like all Malagasy citizens, but in practice, national laws, government, and social services do not reach this population while dwelling in the forest. Within Mykia forest encampments, an egalitarian form of self-government predominates, with the eldest male family member having the main decision-making authority for the group. This is in contrast to certain ethnic groups such as the Marina, who had a complex form of social organization that overlaid a caste system with specific social roles assigned to particular family groups. In 1991, an estimated 1,500 Malagasy were living the Mykia lifestyle, primarily around the Mykia forest, an area that receives limited rainfall. This number was estimated at several hundred in the 1950s, suggesting a growth in population. The true number of people living from forest scavenging is difficult to estimate with accuracy, as the label Mykia is very flexible and the degree of reliance on scavenging as opposed to seasonal farming can vary significantly at any given time depending on economic and environmental conditions. The Mykia are subject to social stigma linked to their image as primitive or uncivilized people. Housing and social organization among the Mykia can vary from one individual or community to the next. Some Mykia remain in the forest their entire lives, while others live part of their lives in villages or towns. While living in the forest, groups of Mykia typically move seasonally between encampments nearest to critical resources. In the rainy season, they often live in groups of 30 to 50 people near tracts of virgin forest in proximity to their newly cleared and planted cornfields. The houses in this settlement settlement are square with peaked roofs, as elsewhere in Madagascar, and are typically made of thatch and bark on a wooden pole frame. These houses are loosely clustered with generous space between each lodging. The rainy season encampment serves for 3 to 5 years as a base for forest foraging before resource depletion requires a move to a new location. Those working the cornfields may live in simple grass shelters alongside their crops until April or May, when they return to the bark houses. During the dry season from May to October, the encampment splits into smaller groups that relocate deeper into the forest to settle near babo tuber patches, with dwellings limited to brush shelters and thatched sunshades, and some individuals not living in shelters at all. In both types of settlements, furniture is nearly non existent, and Mykia typically sleep in the sand or pits dug at the base of giant termite mounds. Mm. The Mykia struggle to ensure the quality of life they seek. While the forest has long provided for their basic needs, deforestation and population growth are straining resources. In addition, Mykia are increasingly seeking to obtain better quality material goods for themselves, such as clothing, which necessitates greater engagement with the external economy through trade and wage labor to earn local currency. Lack of access to social services, such as education and health clinics, are also taking their toll. With only one health clinic in the Mykia forest area and low access to water for bathing, rates of diseases such as tuberculosis, leprosy, and skin disease are disproportionately prevalent. Family affiliation. Mykia tend to trace their lineage back to specific villages within one or more of three main lineages associated respectively with the northern, southern, and central parts of the Mykia forest. Most also have relatives living in Vizo and or Masikoro villages in the region. Many Mykia families have established ziva, a joking relationship commonly found in southern and eastern Africa, with the Vohits Vanovato clan of the Masikoro, which indicates a degree of familial closeness with this subclan. Mykia encampments are typically family groups. These consist of an elder couple, their married sons and daughters in law, the grandchildren of these marriages, and the elder couple's own unmarried children of any age. Adult daughters typically move to their husband's family encampment upon marriage, but married couples often share their time between the husband's or wife's parents' encampments. Family unions are formed through a fandio ceremony in which the man is presented to his intended bride's family, and the acceptance of her parents legitimizes the union. Children of the marriage are legitimized by the husband's bestowal of presents to his wife's parents. The relationship between the wife's brother, Renil Ahi, male mother, and her children can be very strong in Mykia marriages, and the Renilahi will commonly adopt children that his sister's husband does not legitimize. Both the husband and the wife have the right to divorce at any time and remarry. Polygamy is also practiced. Religious affiliation. Like other Malagasy, the Mykia spiritual belief system revolves around respect for ancestors. They also share the common Malagasy belief in a creator god, termed Adriana Janahari. Many Mykia believe in various types of forest spirits called Koko, which are associated with certain natural spots in the forest deemed sacred. These sites serve as the focus of various ceremonies in which rum has spiritual and symbolic significance. The greatest of the nature spirits is the Lord of the Forest, the extended family group, which spreads through multiple encampments and is united around a central priest figure who officiates over major family ceremonies dedicated to the ancestors. In addition, within each encampment is at least one wise man who interprets the will of the ancestors and spirits and plays important roles in such ceremonies as marriage, circumcision, blessings, ancestral rituals, funerals, and trauma and below spirit possession. So, some also practice and other forms of divination and provide spiritual advice on the best days or places to hunt, plant, shift camp, and other such events of daily life. Culture. The Maikea are culturally and linguistically nearly identical to the neighboring Bizo fishing clan and Mazikoro herding and farming clan, the Sakalava. Only the traditional source of livelihood distinguishes the three groups. The popular association of the Maikea with the ancestral V clan has contributed to widespread belief that the Maikea possess V Zimba attributes such as being small in stature, unclothed, shy, and avoidant of contact with outsiders, and living in perfect harmony with the natural environment. None of these are borne out by evidence. The Maikea are known to make masks, a rarity in Madagascar, using human teeth and hair. Dance and music. Music is a significant part of Maikea's social and spiritual life. Specific songs are associated with a wide range of life events and ceremonies, including funerals, magical healing rituals, spirit possession, martial arts matches, circumcision ceremonies, and more. Most music is vocal, often making use of whistling, shouts, and other vocal effects in addition to singing, with percussion accompaniment ranging from hand clapping to drums, conch shells, and the stringed instrument with a gourd resonator played with a bow are also performed. Both of these ancient instruments are increasingly rare in Madagascar, and among the Maikea, the latter is performed by men for one another. Rarer and more costly instruments like the wooden box zither and the bamboo tube are used for certain sacred rituals that invoke the ancestors. The M or V player is typically paid a monetary tribute to perform the ceremonial music. Many songs are accompanied by specific dances and rituals that continue to be practiced among them in daily life. They speak a dialect of, okay, which originated in southern Borneo. Their dialect is close to that spoken of the fishing clan and herding clan of the people. Speculation that there may be remnants of the language in the speech was investigated by Blench and Walsh and found wanting, they concluded. The data is so exegesis and so scattered that it is unlikely to constitute a significant record of a substrate vocabulary as opposed to a set of idiosyncratic words not untypical for a population of former foragers. The speech of these bee people, short statured hunter gatherers of the highlands, has a higher proportion of unidentifiable vocabulary. The arid conditions of the spiny forest, which receives less than 600 millimeters of rainfall each year, largely shape the economic activities. Nearly everything they consume is scavenged from the forest, and the average Maikea needs 2 hours or less to collect adequate food for the day. Their main source of food is tubers, particularly during the dry season when few other foods may be reliably available. What does that sound like? Nematodes, don't it, Ada? Don't the nematodes come with the straws?
Hmm?
Don't the nematodes come with the straws?
I don't even know what
on SpongeBob, the things that come and drink his house up.
Yeah, there's those.
So their main source of food is tubers, particularly during the dry season when few other foods may be reliably available. Adults and children of both genders work to dig up using a metal-tipped digging stick and a digging bowl. The starchy tuber is roasted or boiled before eating, while they eat the watery raw for whatever that is for hydration or use its water for boiling other foods. The tuber is dried and ground to make a flour that is sold at village markets. They also gather forest fruits, melons, and honey, with the latter a particularly important source of income for them during the rainy season. To obtain water during the rainy season, they capture rain runoff from the rooftops of their houses using hollowed out logs, or transport water on foot or drawn wagon from the villages, while during the cool dry season, they consume their store of water in gorged tubers and drink water from natural or man made wells when possible. Key protein sources include birds and tenrics. The adults and children of both sexes use clubs to kill the small rat, which is widespread year round, and the larger one, which is mainly caught during the rainy season. To a lesser extent, they also hunt or trap two or three species of lemur, feral cats, occasional wild boars, turtles, and rodents using blowguns, spears, and dogs. And you, Aiden, get in here, and use a hook and line to catch fish in saline inland lakes. Aiden, excuse me. Some raise animals such as goats, chickens, and guinea fowls for food or sale at market. Tree nuts also provide additional protein. The principal crop is corn, which was introduced to Madagascar in the 1890s. They also occasionally grow maniac. The dry season is used to cut new cornfields, which are burned in October and planted in November and December as the rains began to fall. This corn is harvested 3 months later and consumed during the wet season. Surplus is dried and sold, with some saved for the following year's planting and consumption. The traders who gather the maize from from them process it for international export at a significant profit. They live in a symbiotic relationship with the neighboring farmers and herders and the fishing clan. They live primarily on food scavenged from the forest but also grow seasonal crops. Their mobility and reliance on scavenging as opposed to crop growing shifts in response to changes in environmental and economic pressures on availability of resources within the community as well as those of their neighbors. They sell their forest products as well as woven mats and food animals they raise at weekly markets in the nearby villages to obtain the necessities they cannot scavenge, such as clothing and medicine. Some migrate for periods of time to work in local villages or the town of Morome. They are also hired to work for the villagers nearby, such as by cutting forests for villagers or other cornfields or guarding villagers' herds. They occasionally acquire one or more um, monies in addition to or in lieu of payment, as these are seen as form of wealth and are mainly sacrificed in ancestral ceremonies rather than eaten as food. The rainy season is the time when they are most likely to leave their scavenging encampments for wage labor opportunities in villages or for the corn harvest. This is also the time they when the villagers are most likely to move into the forest to grow corn. Look just like that little doll. Let me say what his name is. Sade. Mm. 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 Aiden, what you playing? What are you doing? All right. Come on. I'm talking to myself. Mm-hmm. 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 Oh, where was I? Okay. Here we go. All right, y'all get the idea. Now, let's pull this up. Blow that baby up right there. Get a good look at his face. Look, hey there, buddy. Hey, buddy, how you doing? All right. Now, with films like The Shining and The Green Mile, many of let me just get him some props. This is the moviebuff.net. Children of the Corn, rated R by Mark Ziobro, October 16th, 2017. With the films like The Shining and The Green Mile, many of Stephen King's blockbuster novels have been turned into hit motion pictures. Unfortunately, the 1984 film Children of the Corn is not one of them. The movie had such promise. A town run amok by killer kids, branding all manner of weapons, the ghost town mentality. Heck, even the movie's poster featured an eerie blood red cover with a menacing scythe stretching overhead. Regrettably, the film makes one too many errors, over explains all its horror, and uncommon a complaint from this writer has too low a body count to make any kind of an impact. The film's opening is brutal and frightening, so brutal in fact that that is the rest of the film comes as a surprise. Without giving away specifics, suffice it to say that most of the adults are now removed from the town. Children rule it all. At the helm, one elder boy named Malachi, Courtney Gangs of Rob Zombie's Halloween fame, and a younger cultish type boy named Isaac John Franklin. The basic plot here is that they all belong to some strange religious cult and must offer sacrifices to appease whomever it is. In the midst of this, a typical American couple, Bert and Vicky, Peter Horton and a young Linda Hamilton, are making their way cross country, but can't seem to get away from the region's eerie town, Gatlin, and end up intertwined in the movie's bizarre proceedings. First, the positives. Cinematically, the film is well done, delivering both an authentic 80s atmosphere and making the region's cornfields somehow much creepier than they should be. Certainly, the best examples of this are when the boy is stalked through the fields by an unknown assailant. Worse yet, when Bert and Vicky find his mutilated body on the road. They initially think they've run him over, but it soon becomes apparent that something much more foul is afoot. There's also the town of Gatlin itself, devoid of all life, run down building and once prospering businesses that now law defunct the only scenery. The couple runs across a pair of children who are apparently not in on the killing but are weird nonetheless. The girl, oddly quiet, is prescient and draws eerie pictures in crayon of what will happen. She depicts murders and sacrifices and adds to Children of the Corn in effective ways. Regrettably, that's about all the movie has going for it. The score and setting are good, but the basic problem is that director Fritz Kirsch shows way too much behind the scenes and explains away all the events that had the potential to be scary. First, there's the body count, which is virtually non existent after the film's grisly opening. Modern films like The Hitcher or The Texas Chainsaw Massacre irk me for the reason that they show not antagonists stalking victims to build suspense, but only gratuitous gore. But here, the stalking is drawn out to a patience losing degree, and the payoffs are never worth the wait. It also doesn't help that most of the suspense building parts of the movie take place in broad daylight, taking away the horrors a cornfield at night would have to offer. Second, any fright that the sea of cornfields had to offer, especially what horrors may lay inside, are stripped from the movie as Kirsch shows scene after scene of the various children of the corn huddled in a in a circle, chanting, praying, discussing their next sacrifice, discussing what to do with Bert and Vicky, the two interlopers. It's as if the filmmakers abandoned all sense of leaving events up to the imagination and just decided to tell audiences exactly what to expect. There's even some half hearted attempts by Bert to comment on the fallacy of believing in false religion, but it's for naught. Children, small in stature, would have been better served here silently talking and dispatching their victims, not painted in broad daylight as a force to be reckoned with. The acting is fine, and you really can't blame either Horton or Hamilton here. And they do a decent job with the limited script they have to work with. Likewise, there's no fault in the acting of the children that fill the cornfields. But at the end of the day, instead of toning it down, Kirsch tries to go for the kill with an overly ambitious ending that pulls the whole thing out of anything that resembles reality. If you're looking for a spooky Stephen King film to watch this Halloween, try the aforementioned The Shining or even Cujo. Do yourself a favor and skip the Children of the Corn. So let's see. Oh, here's Johnny. What'd you say? The Shining is a 1980 psychological horror film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick and co written with novelist Diane Johnson. The film is based on Stephen King's 1977 novel of the same name and stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Crothers, and Danny Lloyd. The film's central character is Jack Torrance, or Nicholson, an aspiring writer and recovering alcoholic who accepts a position as the off season caretaker of the isolated historic Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Rockies. Wintering over with Jack and are his wife, Wendy Torrance Duvall, and young son, Danny Torrance Lloyd. Danny is gifted with the shining psychic abilities that enable him to see into the hotel's horrific past. The hotel cook, Dick Halloran Crothers, also has this ability and is able to communicate with Danny telepathically. The hotel had a previous winter caretaker who went insane and killed his family and himself. After a winter storm leaves the Torrances snowbound, Jack's sanity deteriorates due to the influence of the supernatural forces that inhabit the hotel, placing his wife and son in danger. Production took place almost exclusively at any Elstree Studios, with sets based on real locations. Kubrick often worked with a small crew, which allowed him to do many takes. Love you more. Sometimes to the exhaustion of the actors and staff. The new Steadicam mount was used to shoot several scenes, giving the film an innovative and immersive look and feel. Shh. There has been much speculation about the meanings and actions in the film because of inconsistencies, ambiguities, symbolism, and differences from the book. The film was released in the United States on May 23rd, 1980, and in the United Kingdom on October 2nd, 1980, by the Warner Brothers. There were several versions for theatrical releases, each of which was cut shorter than the one preceding it. About 27 minutes were cut in total. Reactions to the film at the time of release were mixed. Stephen King criticized the film due to its deviations from the novel. Critical opinion has become more favorable, with the film now widely considered one of the greatest horror films ever made, a staple of pop culture. In 2018, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. A sequel, Doctor Sleep, was released in 2019. Hey. So the plot. Jack Torrance takes a winter caretaker position at the remote Overlook Hotel in the Rocky Mountains, which closes every winter season. Manager Stuart Ullman divulges that a previous caretaker, Charles Grady, killed his family and himself in the hotel. In Boulder, Jack's son, Danny, has a premonition and seizure. Jack's wife, Wendy, tells the doctor about a past incident where Jack dislocates Danny's shoulder during a drunken rage. Before leaving the seasonal break, head chef Dick Halloran informs Danny of a telepathic ability the two share, which he calls shining. Halloran tells Danny the hotel also has a shine due to residues from unpleasant past events and warns him to avoid room 237. Danny starts having frightening visions. Meanwhile, Jack's mental health deteriorates. He gets nowhere with his writing, is prone to violent outbursts, and has dreams of killing his family. Rebuke the devil, honey. Rebuke Satan. You got to rebuke Satan. You can't let Satan take over your mind, honey. All right. Danny gets physically bruised after visiting an unlocked room 237 out of curiosity. Jack encounters a female ghost in the room but blames Danny for self-inflicting the bruises. Staying sober ever since hurting Danny, Jack is enticed back to drinking by the ghostly bartender Lloyd. Ghostly figures, including the butler Delbert Grady, then begin appearing in the gold room. Grady informs Jack that Danny has reached out to Halloran using his talent and says that Jack must correct his wife and child. Wendy finds manuscript with the same sentences written over and over again. When Jack threatens her life, Wendy knocks him unconscious with a baseball bat and locks him in the kitchen pantry. She and Danny cannot leave due to Jack having sabotaged the hotel's two-way radio and Snowcat previously. Jack is freed by Grady and goes after Wendy and Danny with an axe. Danny escapes outside through the bathroom window. Wendy attacks Jack with a knife when he breaks through the bathroom door. Halloran, having flown back to Colorado after Danny's telepathic SOS, reaches the hotel in another Snowcat. His arrival distracts Jack. Jack ambushes and murders him in the lobby, then pursues Danny into the hedge maze. Wendy runs through the hotel looking for Danny, encountering the hotel's ghost and a vision of cascading blood similar to Danny's premonition. In the hedge maze, Danny lays a false trail to mislead Jack and hides behind a snowdrift while Jack follows the false trail. Danny and Wendy reunite and leave in Halloran's Snowcat, leaving Jack to freeze to death in the maze. So, before making The Shining, Kubrick directed the film Barry London 1975, a highly visual period film about an Irishman who attempts to make his way into the British aristocracy. Despite its technical achievements, the film was not a box office success in the United States and was derided by critics for being too long and too slow. Kubrick, disappointed with Barry Lyndon's lack of success, realized he needed to make a film that would be commercially viable as well as artistically fulfilling. Stephen King was told that Kubrick had his staff bring him stacks of horror books as he planted himself in his office to read them all. Kubrick's secretary heard the sound of each book hitting the wall as the director flung it into a reject pile after reading the first few pages. Finally, one day, the secretary noticed it had been a while since she had heard the thud of another writer's work biting the dust. She walked in to check on her boss and found Kubrick deeply engrossed in reading The Shining. Speaking about the theme of the film, Kubrick stated that there is something inherently wrong with the human personality. There is an evil side to it. One of the things that horror stories can do is to show us the archetypes of the unconscious. We can see the dark side without having to confront it directly. Nicholson was Kubrick's first choice for the role of Jack Torrance. Other actors considered included Robert De Niro, who claims the film gave him nightmares for a month. Robert Williams and Harrison Ford, all of whom met with Stephen King's disapproval in his search to find the right actor to play Danny Kubrick, sent a husband and wife team, Leon and Kirstie Vitale, to Chicago, Denver, and Cincinnati to create an interview pool of 5,000 boys over a 6-month period. These cities were chosen since Kubrick was looking for a boy with an accent that fell in between Jack Nicholson's and Shelley Duvall's speech patterns. Having chosen King's novel as a basis for his next project, and after a pre-production phase, Kubrick had sets constructed on sound stages at Emmy Elstree Studios in Boreham Wood, Hertfordshire, England. Some of the interior designs of the Overlook Hotel set were based on those of the hotel in Yosemite National Park. To enable him to shoot the scenes in chronological order, he used several stages at the studios in order to make all sets available during the complete duration of production. The set for the Overlook Hotel was at the time the largest ever built there, including a life-size recreation of the exterior of the hotel. In February 1979, the set there was badly damaged in a fire, causing a delay in the production. While most of the interior shots and even some of the Overlook exterior shots were shot on studio sets, a few exterior shots were shot on location by a second unit crew headed by Jan Harlan. St. Mary Lake and Wild Goose Island in Glacier National Park, Montana, was the filming location for the aerial shots of the opening scenes, with the Volkswagen Beetle driving along going to the Sun Road. The Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood in Oregon was filmed for a few of the establishing shots of the fictional Overlook Hotel. Absent in these shots is the hedge maze, something the Timberline Lodge does not have. Outtakes of the opening panorama shots were later used by Ridley Scott for the closing moments of the original cut of the film Blade Runner in 1982. The Shining had a prolonged and arduous production period, often with very long workdays. Principal photography took over a year to complete due to Kubrick's highly methodical nature. Actress Shelley Duvall did not get along with him, frequently arguing with him on set about lines in the script, her acting techniques, and numerous other things. Duvall eventually became so overwhelmed by the stress of her role that she became physically ill for months. At one point, she was under so much stress that her hair began to fall out. The shooting script was being changed constantly, sometimes several times a day, adding more stress. Nicholson eventually became so frustrated with the ever changing script that he would throw away the copies that the production team had given him to memorize, knowing that it was going to change anyway. He learned most of his lines just minutes before filming them. Nicholson was living in London with his then girlfriend, Angelica Huston, and her younger sister, Allegra, who testified to his long shooting days. Joe Turkel stated in a 2014 interview that they rehearsed the bar scene for 6 weeks and that the shoot day lasted from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m., with Turkel recollecting that his clothes were soaked in perspiration by the end of the day's shoot. He also added that it was his favorite scene in the film. For the final Gold Room sequence, he instructed the extras via megaphone not to talk, but to mime conversation to each other. He knew from years of scrutinizing thousands of films that extras could often mime their business by nodding and using large gestures that look fake. He told them to act naturally to give the scene a chilling sense of time-tripping realism as Jack walks from the 70s into the roaring 20s. For the international versions of the film, he shot different takes of Wendy reading the typewriter pages in different languages. For each language, a suitable idiom was used. German, never put off till tomorrow what may be done today. Italian, the morning has gold in its mouth. French, one, here you go, is worth more than two, you'll have it. The equivalent of a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Spanish, no matter how early you get up, you can't make the sun rise any sooner. These alternate shots were not included with the release, where only the English phrase all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy was used. The door that Jack chops through with the axe near the end of the film was real. He originally shot this scene with a fake door, but Nicholson, who had worked as a volunteer fire marshal and a firefighter in the California Air National Guard, tore through it too quickly. Jack's line, "Here's Johnny," is taken from Ed McMahon's introduction to The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and was improvised by Nicholson. Kubrick, who had lived in England for some time, was unaware of the significance of the line and nearly used a different take. Carson later used the Nicholson clip to open his 1980 anniversary show on NBC. During production, he screened David Lynch's Eraserhead to the cast and crew to convey the mood he wanted to achieve for the film. Steadicam. The Shining was among the first half dozen films to use the newly developed Steadicam, a stabilizing mount for a motion picture camera, which mechanically separates the operator's movements from the cameras, allowing smooth tracking shots while the operator is moving over an uneven surface. It essentially combines the stabilized, steady footage of a regular mount with the fluidity and flexibility of a handled camera. The inventor of the Steadicam, Garrett Brown, was heavily involved with the production of The Shining. Brown has described his excitement taking his first tour of the sets, which offered further possibilities for the Steadicam. This tour convinced Brown to become personally involved with the production. He was not just talking of stunt shots and staircases, rather he would use the Steadicam as it was intended to be used, as a tool which can help get the lens where it's wanted in space and time without the classic limitations of the dolly and crane. Brown used an 18mm Cook lens that allowed the Steadicam to pass within an inch of walls and door frames. Brown published an article in American Cinematographer about his experience and contributed to the audio commentary of the 2007 release. Kubrick personally aided in modifying the Steadicam's video transmission technology. Brown states his own abilities to operate the Steadicam were refined by working on Kubrick's film. For this film, Brown developed a two-handed technique, which enabled him to maintain the camera at one height while panning and tilting the camera. In addition to tracking shots from behind, the Steadicam enabled shooting in constricted rooms without flying out walls or backing the camera into doors. He notes that one of the most talked about shots in the picture is the eerie tracking sequence, which follows Danny as he pedals at high speed through corridor after corridor on his plastic big wheel tricycle. The soundtrack explodes with noise when the wheel is on wooden flooring and is abruptly silent as it crosses over carpet. We needed to have the lens just a few inches from the floor and to travel rapidly just behind or ahead of the bike. All right, that's enough of that. All right, catch you guys later.